The cold cut through Britt's chest before fear even had time to form. She stood frozen in the doorway of her room at Bobbie, staring at the open drawer where the medication should have been. Her breath came shallow and fast, each second ticking closer to something irreversible. The storm outside had already passed, but another one had arrived, quieter and far more lethal. The vial that kept her alive was gone, and Britt knew with terrifying certainty that this was not an accident. Jason was behind her, his instincts flaring the moment he saw the color drain from her face. He did not need to ask what was wrong. He could see it in the way her hands trembled, in the way her eyes scanned the room as if hoping the truth would suddenly rearrange itself. Britt took a step forward, then another, checking the desk, the bedside table, the bathroom shelf, every place she would ever allow that vial to rest. She was meticulous about it. She had to be. Huntington's disease did not allow carelessness, and neither did survival. "It was here," she said, her voice barely holding together. "I never move it. Never." Jason moved past her, his gaze sweeping the room with a sharper focus. The bed had been disturbed. The drawer beneath the desk was slightly crooked, not fully closed. A chair had been shifted from its usual place. These were small things, but they screamed intrusion. Someone had been inside this room. Someone had searched it deliberately. Britt pressed a hand to her chest as panic tightened its grip. She told Jason what he already understood. Without the medication, her condition could spiral quickly. Missing a dose was dangerous. Missing more than one could be fatal. This was not about discomfort or weakness. This was about time running out. Jason told her to breathe, to sit down, but Britt could not stay still. Her thoughts raced through every possibility, every enemy, every person who might want her scared or silent. The room felt smaller with each passing second. The walls seemed to close in, mirroring the pressure building in her body. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone knew exactly what they were taking. The storm had forced Britt back to Bobbie. She had not planned to be here. She had wanted to avoid this place, avoid memories and questions and people who watched her too closely. But the weather had made the decision for her. Roads closed, power flickered, she needed her medication, and she needed it now. Returning to her room had felt logical, even safe. She had not imagined that safety was already gone. Jason asked her who knew about the medication. Britt hesitated, then answered honestly, "Not many people." She had guarded that secret carefully, just as she had guarded so many others. The disease was not something she shared easily. It made her vulnerable in ways she despised. Her mind went first to Carly, almost reflexively. Carly had never trusted her. There was tension there that never fully disappeared, an undercurrent of suspicion sharpened by Britt's closeness to Jason. Carly believed Britt was hiding something, possibly something dangerous, but as quickly as the thought came, Britt pushed it away. Carly had not been here. Carly did not even know about the medication or the severity of Britt's condition. Hatred alone was not enough. This theft required knowledge. Jason agreed. Carly was many things, but this did not fit. The act was too precise, too calculated. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of that realization settling between them. Then another name surfaced, heavy and unavoidable. Marco. Britt felt a chill deeper than the cold outside. Marco knew. He knew about her illness, about the medication, about what would happen if she went without it. He had listened carefully when she spoke, watched her closely when she thought she was alone, and more importantly, Marco was Sidwell's son. Sidwell. The name carried with it the echo of a gunshot, the image Britt could never erase. Dalton collapsing to the floor, blood spreading, Sidwell's face unreadable as he pulled the trigger. Britt had been there. Britt had seen everything, and Sidwell had seen her see it. At the time, Sidwell had made his warning clear, without needing to raise his voice. Britt was not to speak, not to anyone. Silence was her shield, and it was the only thing keeping her alive. She had believed him. Fear had locked the secret inside her, sealing her lips for weeks. Until Jason. Telling Jason had felt like tearing open a wound and finally letting it breathe. She had trusted him, needed him. She had believed that sharing the truth would bring protection, maybe even justice, but secrets had a way of leaking, especially dangerous ones. Sidwell had ways of knowing things, and Marco was always watching. Jason pieced it together with cold clarity. Marco had been following Britt, Not clumsily, not openly, but with intent. He had seen her talk to Jason. He had understood what that meant. Britt was no longer silent. Marco would never allow a threat to his father to remain unchecked. He would act. And Sidwell would decide how. This was punishment. Sidwell had not chosen a gun or a knife. He had chosen something quieter, something that left no fingerprints. Stealing the medication was elegant in its cruelty. It would look like illness, like weakness, like inevitability. Britt would fade, and Sidwell's hands would remain clean. But Sidwell had underestimated something, or someone. Jason. Jason did not waste time on speculation once the pieces aligned. He knew Marco was the key. Marco had taken the vial, and Marco would be forced to give it back. One way or another, Britt watched Jason as he made quiet calls, his voice low and controlled. She had seen him like this before, when a line had been crossed and consequences were inevitable. Part of her was relieved. Another part was terrified. She did not want blood spilled because of her. She did not want Jason to become a monster on her behalf. Yet fear had a way of sharpening desires. Right now, Britt wanted to live. What Britt did not know was that Marco had not thought beyond the order he was given. He had not considered the wider implications. He had not considered Cullum. Cullum's research project depended on very few people, and Britt was one of them. Dalton had already been eliminated. If Britt died too, the project would collapse. Cullum was not a man who accepted failure, and he was certainly not a man who forgave interference. Marco believed he was protecting his father. In reality, he might have signed both their death warrants. Sidwell himself walked a thin line. He believed fear was enough to control outcomes. He believed Britt would break, that Jason would be too late, or too cautious, or too distracted. He had not accounted for Cullum's patience wearing thin. He had not accounted for Jason's resolve. Back at Bobbie, Britt's condition began to show subtle cracks. A tremor in her hand she could not fully suppress. A moment of dizziness that forced her to sit. Jason noticed everything. Every second mattered now. He told Britt he was going to find Marco. Britt grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. She asked him not to do anything reckless. Jason looked at her, rarely looked at her, and promised only one thing. He would not lose her again. The words carried weight, history, regret. Britt knew what they meant. She also knew what Jason was capable of when pushed. As Jason left, Britt was alone with her thoughts and the ticking clock inside her body. She replayed every moment that had led here, seeing Dalton die, staying silent, finally speaking, trusting the wrong people, trusting the right one too late. Outside, the city began to thaw after the storm, unaware that another crisis was unfolding in shadows and closed rooms. Somewhere out there, Marco held a small vial that determined whether Britt would see another sunrise. Somewhere out there, Sidwell waited to see if his lesson would be learned. And somewhere between them, Jason moved with purpose, each step bringing him closer to a confrontation that could end in salvation or in blood. Jason moved through the city like a shadow with purpose. Every contact he had ever cultivated came back into focus as he narrowed in on Marco. He did not shout or threaten. He listened. He watched. He followed the faint trails people never realized they left behind. Marco was careful, but fear made people sloppy, and Marco was afraid now whether he admitted it or not. Britt remained at Bobbie under quiet supervision. She insisted she was fine even as her body betrayed her in small, cruel ways. Her hands shook more often. Her thoughts felt slower as if wading through water. Each missed hour tightened the knot of danger around her. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself that panic would only make things worse. Still, the silence gnawed at her. Every minute without news felt heavier than the last. Jason finally learned where Marco had been hiding. A warehouse near the docks, unused on paper but very much alive behind locked doors and darkened windows. It fit Sidwell perfectly discreet and isolated and expendable if necessary. Jason did not bring backup. This was personal, and he knew involving too many people only increased the risk to Britt. Marco did not expect Jason to arrive alone. When he heard footsteps echo through the empty space, his first instinct was to run. He stopped when he saw Jason step into the light, calm and terrifyingly focused. Jason did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. His presence alone was enough to make Marco's pulse race. Jason told Marco he wanted the medication back. Marco laughed nervously at first, pretending ignorance, pretending bravado. It fell apart quickly when Jason explained exactly what would happen if Britt died. Not just to Marco, but to Sidwell. Cullum would not wait. Cullum would not ask questions. He would erase problems. The color drained from Marco's face. He admitted the truth in fragments. He had followed orders. He had not meant to kill Britt. He had believed she would break first. Jason listened without sympathy. Intent did not matter anymore. Only time did. Marco finally revealed where he had hidden the vial. It was close, almost insultingly close, locked in a small safe inside the warehouse office. Jason retrieved it himself, checking the seal, checking the label, checking everything twice. Relief surged through him, sharp and overwhelming, but he did not let it slow him down. Before Jason left, he gave Marco a choice. Walk away from Sidwell, now disappear, and never look back. Or stay and face what was coming. Jason did not need to threaten. Marco already understood. Jason turned and walked out without waiting for an answer. Back at Bobbie, Britt was fading. The room felt too warm, too bright. She struggled to focus on the television, murmuring nonsense she could not follow. When the door opened, she barely reacted at first, until she recognized the shape of him, the sound of his footsteps. Jason crossed the room in seconds, placing the vial in her hand like it was something sacred. Britt stared at it for a heartbeat, unable to believe it was real. Then her breath broke and she laughed and cried at the same time, hands shaking as she took the medication she needed to survive. Jason stayed with her, watching closely, as the worst of the danger slowly eased. It was not instant, but it was enough. Britt leaned back against the pillows, exhausted but alive. She looked at Jason with something deeper than gratitude, trust, relief, love she rarely allowed herself to name. News traveled fast in the circles. Sidwell moved in. Cullum heard what had happened and he was not forgiving. Sidwell realized too late that fear had limits and that his control was slipping. Marco vanished before Sidwell could find him, leaving his father exposed and alone. Sidwell tried to flee, but poor Charles had a long memory and longer reach. He was arrested days later, not just for Dalton's murder, but for a web of crimes that finally unraveled without Britt needing to say another word. Evidence surfaced, witnesses spoke, alliances shifted. Sidwell fell hard. Cullum visited Britt once quietly. He thanked her for surviving. It was not kindness, it was calculation. Still, it meant the project would continue and Britt would remain essential, not expendable. As life in Port Charles settled, Britt began to reclaim pieces of herself she thought were gone. She faced her illness with new resolve, no longer alone in it. Jason remained close, not hovering, but present. They did not make promises they could not keep. They did not pretend the future would be easy. What they had was honesty earned through fear and survival. Britt had faced death and lived. Jason had chosen her, and that choice mattered more than words. In the end, the storm that mattered most was the one they walked through together. It left scars and truths in its wake, but it also left something stronger, a chance. And this time, Britt intended to take it.